Hello and welcome to The Hearing, our music review show here on the channel. I'm John.
What's up? I'm Scotto.
And let's just get straight to this week's album, which is from 1967, Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues. The Moody Blues are an English rock band. Yes, they're still together, which at the time consisted of Justin Hayward on guitar, piano, sitar, and vocals, John Lodge on bass and vocals, Mike Pinder on mellotron, piano, tambura, gong vocals, including spoken, Ray Thomas on flute, percussion, piano, vocals, Graham Edge on drums, percussion, and vocals, and also featured Peter Knight conducting and arranging for the London Festival Orchestra. I'm glad I had a minute to wait for you to reread my notes because I almost said symphonic.
Oh.
I was sure it was the LSO. They formed in Birmingham, England in 1964, but first came to prominence playing rhythm and blues.
Of course, that's the name.
Their second album and their first concept album is Days of Future Past, which was released in 1967 and was a fusion of rock with classical music and established them as pure pioneers of the development of art rock and progressive rock. It has been described as a landmark and one of the most successful concept albums. Bit of a confession before we go any further. The first Moody Blues song I ever heard was Wildest Dreams.
Really? You heard that before Knights in White Satin, huh?
I knew them as the cheesy 80s pop group before I knew them as the progressive rock band.
I mean, Knights in White Satin was just so played out.
I didn't hear it until college, I don't think.
Wow. Okay.
And Wildest Dreams was all over MTV in the 80s.
Well, yeah, then it was like, well, wait a minute. The guys that did this Knights in White Satin song from an eon ago are now suddenly putting out. That was what was so weird about the 80s. We're just all of these old acts.
I had the better experience because you knew Knights in White Satin and then went to Wildest Dreams. To me, they got better because I first started with this horrible pop and then found out about this amazing prog. Now, there's a bit of a controversy about this album. The group claims that after 2 years of performing as a struggling white R&B band, the Moody Blues were asked in September of 1967 to record an adaptation of Antonin Dvorak's Symphony No. 9 for Decca's newly formed Deram Records division in order to demonstrate their latest recording techniques, which were named Deramic Sound.
Right.
Instead, the band initially, without the label's knowledge, decided to focus on an original album based on an original stage show that they'd been working on. However, recording engineer Derek Farnells disputes this claim, claiming that even at the start of the recording sessions in 1967, there was no intent to record a Dvorak album, and that project wasn't talked about until the mid-70s. I'm inclined to believe the engineer, because who would bring in an R&B band to record Dvorak?
Well, I think the way I originally heard it was that they didn't know there was... They were brought in.
Okay, but why would the record company want this? I mean, I listened to their first album. It is radically different.
Yeah.
And, if you've ever heard the song Go Now, that's their first album.
Right.
Why would you hire that band who were really, I mean, if I'm honest, Beatles wannabes?
Yeah. I think everybody was.
Why would you hire them to do Dvorak? Dvorak is classical.
64, 65 and 66.
They were very typically early 60s British Invasion. They were one of those bands.
But I don't think they were hired to do that, really. I think from what I heard, that no one knew they were involved, and that was like the London Festival Orchestra. It was kind of...
They were going to do the Dvorak thing, right?
Right. There was like a definite con going on with the record company. Of what they thought they were going to get produced and what actually got produced.
Okay.
That's how I understood it, at least.
That makes a bit more sense.
Because I wouldn't expect them to do this.
Right.
But who would expect a rock and symphonic merge like this, though?
This must have been a hell of a gut punch to fans of the first album.
If this album wasn't produced 10 and someone came out with this album today, it would still blow people's minds.
Oh, yes. I mean, some of the recording techniques are a little dated, but
of course, right.
It's brilliant. But this is like, I'm trying to think of an example of, like, imagine if Stevie Ray Vaughan did a classical album.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean that
I mean,
that
I'm,
that's
I'm giving them a bit more credit than they deserve for the first album, but I can't think of a mediocre kind of R&B thing. Um, and another example of mediocre R&B. Suddenly, changing a couple of members and doing a classical thing. Hayward and Lodge really must have taken over the band.
right. You could, yeah. I wouldn't say Stevie Ray Vaughan. I'd say something like, you know, Train. I
That's a
guess.
that's a great example. Yes, I should. They are perfect. Like I couldn't think of anybody. Yeah,
And they
Imagine
were,
if
and
Train.
Train was trying to do a symphonic thing with drops of
A little
Jupiter.
bit,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
they were very much trying to do a Moody Blues with that in a
Right,
way.
right.
But I mean, but this is full on overture
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just I mean, if we want to start the track by track,
Yes, yes. Beginning with track one, and the tracks are a bit interesting on this album.
the
Uh,
tracks are just plain old fucked up, honestly.
there are. I'm counting seven, but they usually have one or two subtracks. Track
Right.
one, "The Day Begins." This includes "The Day Begins," written by Peter Knight, and "Morning Glory," which is just a poem written by Graham Edge, and it's unlisted. This is purely orchestral with a spoken poem. I think the credit said, it was spoken by Mike Pinder.
Yeah.
Um, and it has a very slow fade. I didn't hear anything for the first 13 seconds.
The intro is a heartbeat shy of the beginning of Dark Side of the Moon, honestly.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
And when
which
the
is
music,
recorded what 7 years later.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
And when the music comes in, it really sounds like a movie score.
it's an overture.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
the
I didn't realize that until later. When I recognized parts of White Satin in it.
right the themes in there. They hit the movements of the orchestra of the symphony, which is how they're treating this
Mhm.
rock album.
Yeah.
That's not a rock album.
And it sounds like a movie score. It sounds very A Summer Place to me
Mhm.
on this first piece, and throughout. And then they get to this sort of galloping thing that sounds a bit medieval, and
Right.
then they go back to A Summer Place, and it's not exactly A Summer Place, but it has that feel.
Yeah.
Um, and like 3 minutes in, I recognized a little bit of White Satin and realized it was an overture.
Right. They hit Tuesday Afternoon in there. They
I
hit
didn't
Nights in
catch
White
Tuesday
Satin.
Afternoon.
I think I'm trying to think of what else they hit. They hit a little of Dawn as a Feeling, of
Mhm.
course.
This, I will say, is my first time hearing the full album. I know Nights
Oh,
of White
really?
Satin. I know Nights of White Satin in its entirety, and Tuesday Afternoon, of course. We'll
Do
get to
you?
that. That's all I know, or all I knew going
Where
in.
would you have heard Tuesday Afternoon before this?
All I knew going in was Tuesday Afternoon, and both in their entirety.
Yeah.
Not like the singles cut, but that's all I knew. The rest was a surprise.
Well, right.
So,
Yeah. I think the first time going in, those are the only two songs I had heard too before listening to the whole thing for the first time. Maybe I'm trying to think how long ago was it I heard this. I had this on CD back in the day.
and because I knew Nights of White Satin in its entirety, when the poem came in, it was very familiar
Yeah.
because the first stanza is repeated in at the end of Nights of White Satin,
Right.
and it's
They
this. Okay.
they do the book ending here with the poem. They
Mhm.
use like I was never a fan of the poem, but
I
in
like
the
it.
album, of course, you understand it once you
Yeah,
hear it in the context.
it's nicely dark, which is a great contrast to A Summer Place. I'm just going to call it A Summer Place. It's this kind of dark, metaphysical, not meta, I guess metaphysical works, poem but that just talks about time and planets and Mike Pinder has this great dramatic voice. We'll get to when he on the next song. I'll talk more about his voice. Um, but it's just a great contrast to A Summer Place, and then it goes back to A Summer Place, and the first four tracks link with the classical music.
Oh yeah.
The orchestra links the first four tracks, which I thought was great. It goes right into track two, Dawn. Dawn is a Feeling. I don't know how I feel about that title, but we get more Summer Place, and it really does feel like a 70s rom com.
Uh, but I mean, when I first heard this album, I don't know how many years ago, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna dig this. I can listen to some classical, but then is that what this whole thing is gonna be? And then it gets, then it that Dawn is a Feeling kicks off, and you're just like, wait, is this the orchestra still with the Moody Blues? Is this the Moody Blues without the
From
orchestra?
what I've read, there is no mixing except on Nights in White Satin.
Right.
Everything
Well,
else, it's just the band or just the
it's
orchestra. Everything on the band songs, it sounds like the orchestra is probably a
the
mellotron.
Mellotron. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. So they use the Mellotron,
yeah.
and it
And
just
this is the first pop
blends.
song on the album. You know,
Yes. I'd say this one would be more of a prog than a pop,
well, I
honestly.
mean, pop in the larger sense, popular music. It's
Yeah.
the first, band song we get that isn't just a classical piece.
I feel you have a certain amount of pop on this album
Oh,
and a certain amount of prog too.
mhm,
Like
yeah.
the three movements are the prog songs really,
Mhm.
and although there should be four, isn't there? Well, anyway, yeah, or
It
no, there could be
varies. There's no, it's not set in stone. And this is a Mike Pender song, so he sang it. And I really wasn't familiar with any of the other singers in the band other than Justin
I
Hayward
think
before this.
Hayward does some vocals on it too, though.
Okay.
Like
I wasn't sure.
I
And
think they both share. I think he does like that. Uh, I think it starts with Hayward, and
okay.
then there's that other deeper part that goes
Mhm.
in. Do you understand? I
Because
think that's Pinder.
I'd never heard Pender before this.
He
And
has a deeper voice than Hayward.
I have to give him the biggest compliment I can give to a singer. He reminds me of Ian Anderson.
Yes, he does sound a lot like Ian Anderson, but
And we haven't when we review Tall, I'll go more into this, but Ian Anderson is my spirit animal. I greatly admire the man. He's a hero of mine. So to say that Mike Pinder reminds me of him is a huge compliment.
but listening to Hayward's voice, man, how I kind of would have wanted him on every track, honestly.
See, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm too accustomed to his voice. I've never been a fan of Hayward's voice. I mean, he's serviceable,
Really?
but he's kind of just there. Everybody else was more interesting.
I mean, really, the song, of course, is Tuesday Afternoon, where it's just I mean, where he just does those runs and just you're just like, wow.
I have a special place for Tuesday Afternoon. Again, we'll get to that, but I prefer Pinder's voice because he reminds me of Ian Anderson.
Yeah.
And moving on to track 3, "The Morning, Another Morning." The repetition it was a little annoying for these two tracks. This is the first Ray Thomas song, and I have to say, I think Ray Thomas wrote the most interesting stuff on the album.
Well, if you're following the concept, the day begins, of course, is nothingness to birth.
Right.
Dawn, of course, is infancy, where you really don't know what the fuck is happening all around you, and everything, even the slightest thing, just looks magical to you. And then, of course, we kind of have like early childhood here.
Yeah. And it's a very British, very kind of old-fashioned song. It's a Ringo song.
Yes.
And I'd never heard Thomas sing before. I think it was after we decided to do this album, and I was looking over the credits like a few weeks ago. I never knew he wrote anything. Again, I'm coming from Wildest Dreams.
Yeah.
So to me, Ray Thomas was the guy who played tambourine.
And this is, of course, one of I would call a pop song on the album,
Yeah.
definitely.
This is a pop song. It's a Ringo song. It's very old-fashioned, very British, but it was a great touch, a very big surprise. I like Ray Thomas's voice, and I kind of like what he brings as
And
a writer.
oddly enough, the prog songs were the singles off the album, and the pop songs were not. But I mean, the one part of this song, everything is about la 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 la, except when he gets to the yesterday's dreams are tomorrow's sighs.
Yeah.
And the tone completely changes if you notice too, because they move from the child perspective to the adult perspective of him noticing just how so many dreams just go unfulfilled. There's so many observations like that in this album. We're just like, damn, that's good.
And then at the end of this, we get the other side of the orchestra. Because the orchestra, aside from that little medieval thing in the first track,
right,
the orchestra basically has two sides to it in this album. You have a summer place, and then you have a straight up Gershwin ripoff.
Oh, well, you have your full on crescendos and stuff.
Well, you have the big dramatic, which is more of a summer place, and then we get into these up tempo stuff that is completely ripped off from Gershwin.
Yes,
I mean I don't know if I'm impressed with Peter Knight or ashamed of him because it's such a copy, but it fits where this song is going because this is definitely movie music and it gets very bouncy. And it is what you've heard in every 40s through 60s business city scene.
And if you think about it, they kind of echo this towards the end of Tuesday Afternoon.
Oh yeah, the Gershwin continues throughout.
But I mean, it's kind of like a faded kind of echo back to your youth, when you're pulling through your adolescence.
And now we have the first rock song. This is moving the track for lunch hour, peak hour.
Right, and it's kind of surprising too, because you've just been bouncing la la la, and then they're in an orchestral section, and you kind of have like what an intermezzo, I guess it would be called, like the dance number with the hustle they've got going on.
Well, it's a very up tempo. It's very Gershwin bouncy city music. And then these distorted electric guitars, not like heavy metal, but for the time, distorted.
It's 67. That's fucking rock. It's about as heavy as you get.
Like, almost acid rock comes in, because acid rock was like another year or two off.
Right, and I mean, you get a kind of a surf rock vibe from it.
It's a bit Born to Be Wild, maybe. But
I think it's before that too, isn't it?
I'm not sure offhand. But it's got that kind of feel, and it's a John Lodge song. I need to look into more of his stuff too. Because I think he seems to write the more rock stuff. And this is the only time where I've really noticed that the recording is a bit dated.
Yeah.
And I mean, the way the band sounds together.
There are several different versions of this out there, by the way.
Okay, yeah. On Spotify, there's like 3 or 4. Most of them were extended.
I started with the 17 version and immediately switched off because I did not like how Dawn Is a Feeling sounded.
Okay.
Like the vocals are just so like echoey and like just under the record mix is kind of like, who the fuck did this?
And this is a tangent, but what was his name? The Beatles producer, George Martin did so much for recorded music.
Yeah.
With them, because they started sounding like this. The early 60s Beatles stuff, it was on a 4-track, all in the same room.
Right.
And he learned to really manipulate a 4-track and make the most of it.
Oh, yeah.
This song and a lot of the stuff, the band stuff on this album, was before they really knew how to do that.
Yeah.
So you have the band in one room playing together. It's very boxy, very echoey sounding.
And I mean, this came out like months after Sgt. Pepper.
Right, yeah. I meant to look up the timing.
Yeah, I think Sgt. Pepper was like February of 67. This was November.
Because there was a bit of a race for the first concept album.
Yeah.
Between the Beatles, Moody Blues, and Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson was working on Smile and competing with the Beatles with Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper,
big album.
Let's get this out here, though. Sgt. Pepper isn't a concept album.
Borderline. I mean, it's not this. It's not Quadrophenia. Those were really proper concept.
You have the bookends of the band, like that comes in, and the band that's going through the motions, and then you have the outro of the band going through the motions. But they don't even talk about that. It's just play like a quick little ditty in the album, but there's no concept.
Right. Well, maybe concept album was the wrong word, but it's that first attempt.
You're not the person to call it. The reason why I had to throw it out there is because you are not the first person to call it that. Many people can say, "Oh, the first concept album, it inspired so much." It was kind of like, but it wasn't a concept album.
Yeah, and it was also the first time one of the first attempts at doing something big with a rock album.
And
orchestral elements, and
I was gonna say it isn't even the first time the Beatles. Yeah, I don't even think it was the first time the Beatles did orchestral elements in there either. So I don't understand.
I know I've seen an interview with Brian Wilson. A whole VH1 did this whole thing on the making of Smile, which was this big epic album that he'd written and tried to record, never got released, and he was competing with Sgt. Pepper. And I know the Moody Blues were in that mix too to do this. Do you know the year of Quadrophenia offhand?
I think that was, I think it was 70.
Was it? Okay, it was a little later.
Well, because I mean, I think Tommy was first.
Was it first? I thought Quadrophenia was first.
To the internet.
Speaking of the Beatles, while you look that up, Peak Hour
Quadrophenia was 73.
Oh, it was. It was after Tommy. Okay.
Yeah.
So Tommy was probably like 69. So yeah, this was a little bit before that. So the Who weren't in the running for first. It really
they were inspired by all this.
They might have. This might have been the first concept album then. If
Yeah,
you don't count Sgt. Pepper, which I
right.
agree
I
with
mean,
you.
this is the first true concept
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
album.
And speaking of the Beatles, this has a nice Beatlesque bridge.
Oh
You've
yeah.
got this rock song, and then it slows down to this nice kind of Beatlesque thing. And then a really great short Mellotron solo. At least I think it's a Mellotron.
Well, that whole dun dun, not the Mellotron solo, but that backbeat they give at the end. That's
The great dramatic ending. And it's the first time the orchestra doesn't link songs.
yeah.
Because the next track, The Afternoon, Forever Afternoon, Tuesday? And that's
Well,
how it's written, Tuesday in parentheses with a question mark.
Lunch Break is how the side ends.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I forgot about
that whole
sides.
that whole dramatic ending is how they end the first side.
I
So you're just
totally
like,
forgot about
whoa.
sides.
And then yeah,
Right.
Tuesday afternoon, that
Mhm.
dramatic beginning
And
is how
and
they go into the second side.
and this is another case of two songs in one. For The Afternoon Forever Afternoon Tuesday is Tuesday Afternoon, written by Justin Hayward, and Evening Time to Get Away, written by Ray Thomas. First time not linked by an orchestra, and we need to talk about Tuesday Afternoon.
We do. We have a history with this song.
Back when we were working in college radio, which is where our creative partnership began.
Oh man, decades ago.
26 years ago, I want to say 91.
Yeah, at least.
Fall of, I
Yeah,
think it was
26.
fall of 91. So
Yeah.
do the math. 26, just over 26. We did shows on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons from 4 to 6. And on Tuesday, this was our theme song.
For some reason, I only started out on Tuesdays.
Did you? Okay, I wasn't sure. Oh, but I was working with another DJ at the time.
Right. So it was like Tuesday was a big deal at the beginning.
Right. So yeah, we used this on the Tuesday afternoon shows because Tuesday afternoon. I have so much nostalgia for this song and I really don't have any notes because I was just kind of silently singing along with it.
Well, right, because I mean we heard it so many times back then,
and I still love it.
And as unoriginal as it was for us to have this as a theme show, I mean, it's pretty much like a get the let out, Tuesday sort of thing.
Right.
Manic Monday on fucking Monday.
Right.
But and of course, it was a shit name for a podcast. So.
A radio show, the Tuesday. I've never been good at naming things.
We came back with it for a podcast, though.
Right, for the podcast was the Tuesday afternoon show because the podcast was really just a continuation of the radio show.
All right, well.
And back to the song. Love, and I've never really analyzed the song before now because I just enjoyed it. Loved the change between the verse and the chorus because the verses is really slow,
right?
What's the word I'm looking for? Spread out, melody, and then it just brings in this bouncy rhythm for the chorus
with the mellotron, though.
Yeah,
you gotta love it when they're like grooving with the mellotron, like kind of like what they do with Dawn,
right?
But only even more so in this, where they're really like stepped it up a pace.
And I don't know if this is the first time I've listened with headphones or not, but I never noticed that the chorus starts in the right ear.
I don't know. It
starts off on one side.
Yeah, it probably depends on the mix. I think the mixes have changed.
Maybe. This one starts off
definitely. Come on, we were DJs. We listened with headphones, didn't we?
I don't think I don't remember.
I thought you had headphones.
I had headphones on when I was talking. I think I took them off when the music started.
Oh,
I know, because the music was over the monitors. Because
that's right.
We always had people in.
That's right.
I just had the phones on when I was talking. So I never noticed that it starts at left ear. I think it was. It's what I'm pointing to. But I never noticed that before. But I love how it gets really interesting with the panning throughout that chorus.
Yeah, and it's a heavy element of the song, the panning too. Because you are on this journey. I mean, you're in, adolescence, and everything is just like everything is in a tailspin here.
And it's another nice transition to the orchestra, and then another Ray Thomas song. I just like his stuff. It's interesting.
It is. I mean, this is another pop song. Oddly enough, not the single.
Like, I don't know. And you mentioned another pop song with Ray Thomas when in their pop era, real pop era, he was really not involved with any of that.
Yeah.
He had very little to do with those albums. Again, we end with a nice Mellotron solo. I think it's a Mellotron again. Mellotron, for those who don't know, Mellotron is a keyboard instrument that played tape loops.
Yeah, so
So
it
it
was
was really the first synthesizer.
and to use this in '67. I mean,
Mhm.
there weren't many people using it in '67.
Right, right.
I mean, its real heyday was the early '70s more
Mhm.
than anything else.
Yeah.
Maybe Keith Emerson may have been using it at this time because he was just ahead of everybody.
Well, of course, of
But
course.
I mean, still, that last end of evening, just I mean, it starts as a very sad working class ballad,
End of Tuesday afternoon. Of afternoon, you mean?
right? And it just, I mean, life just beats the shit out of people. It's pretty much the of the song. But then think about the context that they're using evening in this on this
Yes.
album. Uh, Evening is closer to death.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's a whole thing with life. It's not just this is not just times of day.
Right. Oh, of course, yeah.
Right.
We've been
We've
following
mentioned it
along with
with
that.
birth and adolescence. Evening is sunset.
Right. And I mean, the thing I don't like about the vocal though, of course, is the falsetto.
I don't have a problem with his voice. None of the only vocals in this album that really stuck out to me were John Lodge because I never really heard him too much
Yeah.
before, and of course Mike Pinder, who I want to hear more from.
Or as I wrote my notes, sick falsetto, bruh, but give us more Hayward.
On to track 6, Evening, Proper
Evening.
Evening. This includes The Sunset by Mike Pinder and Twilight Time Again by Ray Thomas.
Probably the weirdest song on the album.
And this, again, it's a nice, abrupt Gershwin pickup. We go into that, city music. And then we get into a very hippie song.
Oh, yeah.
With some
Very
really
weird.
interesting percussion.
Quite funky. Unexpectedly funky.
And more Ian Anderson vibes. I mean, this is just I had a vision of pinstripes and hookahs listening to this song.
I wrote a really weird Tuesday afternoon skit inspired from this song. Actually,
really,
it was something like the sausage ballet or something like that. It was something really
I
fucking
don't
out
remember
there.
that.
It was like towards the end of the show. Actually,
Okay.
I think it was that sausage
Mhm.
box Lemur
Okay.
below
Oh,
episode.
the double solo episode, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it came from this.
Okay. I wasn't paying much attention to the lyrics. Again, it was very trippy,
Oh, it has
very
nothing to do with the
hippie.
lyrics. It was just the mood and this weird,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because it's such an epic sound too from the symphony
Mhm.
orchestra. In this very strange, funky.
Yeah, and then because it starts off with the
intro.
Gershwin and then picks up and just transitions to this very hippie percussion
Yeah,
and this just incredibly tripped out song. And then we're back to the Gershwin with a
yeah,
very nice fade, and then back to a summer place briefly, unfortunately. Um, and then we go to a very psychedelic Thomas song,
yeah.
which I think is the most interesting song on the album to me.
Really?
It pans all over the place, and it's got this great kind of minor key, unsettling tonality.
Well, yeah, because I mean, this is life ticking down.
Yeah.
Like this is. There's not much time left on this earth, kind
As
of thing.
I've said on Zombie Take It a number of times, I love pathos,
Yeah,
and this is pure pathos.
it is.
Coming from Ray Thomas, who wrote the da 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 earlier in the album. He wrote childhood, and now he's writing death.
Right, it's the flip side of that. It's not necessarily death.
Not death, but decline.
Give it a minute. To quote Rocky Horror fans, give it time.
Right, exactly.
Not yet.
And it goes to almost a Vivaldi thing at the end. It's very fluttery. It's very winter, I think is the season. And then into probably the best known song from the album.
And of course, I mean, Vivaldi, of course, had to have been a huge inspiration of this because they were pretty much taking the seasons. Yeah. And before was fall, and now we're heading into winter.
Right. And now we have the best known song, The Night, aka Nights in White Satin by Justin Hayward, and Late Lament / Resolvement by Graham Edge, another orchestral piece with a poem. I've never heard them separate.
Right. I think I have. There's been some radio stations that played it separate.
Okay, I've never heard Nights in White Satin without the poem, which is a good thing because I love the poem again. And the links are back. The orchestra links these two.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, definitely, because this is the big crescendo. This is as Peter Gabriel would say, time to meet the chef.
And it's another case where I don't have much to say about it because I'm just so familiar with the songs.
It is. It's kind of it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, exactly,
It's
exactly.
been shoehorned into so many different movies and TV shows. What was that movie like Shattered or whatever,
Mhm.
where it was like a central component of the film, yet it had nothing to do with the film.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, okay, it's a love song, and
Mhm.
we're just going to put it in from beginning to end and have it return over. You know,
This may be a different version, different mix than I'm accustomed to, though. It sounded a little bit different, maybe a little more boxy than, not as big as the one I know.
I wonder
Um,
if you listen to the
I
2017.
did.
Yeah, I couldn't. I just couldn't deal. You know what? I think it's actually the complete version of it, from what I understand.
Okay.
Like there was lost footage, or lost parts of the
Uh-huh.
recording for many years that they
Oh, interesting.
recovered and worked into it. But
But
the
it,
mix just doesn't do it for
yeah,
me.
yeah, it's again very small, very boxy,
Yeah,
very early '60s. Um, I did notice again, these are things again looking at it analytically, or analyzing it. I loved the screaming background vocals on the chorus.
yeah.
This is
It's.
it's an but it's this big screaming thing, and I don't know if it's a mellotron or if it's an actual voice.
I think it's that damn falsetto again that he loved using.
And of
Enter it.
course, the flute solo is iconic.
Yeah.
It's the only flute solo I noticed on the album.
There's a few. Well, not solos, but there's
There's
the flute
flute here,
does recur like
but
Tuesday
he
afternoon
takes a
in
proper
chorus.
solo here, and it's just, I mean, again, it's maybe because I know the song so well. It's just that melody is so iconic and so beautiful.
I mean, it's kind of been ruined by Hollywood, I think, like
Uh,
just
uh,
overused.
yeah, I haven't heard it in a while, so it was
Yeah.
nice to revisit again the solo because it just gives me chills.
Yeah. I mean, it is a very beautiful song. I mean, it's kind of like, Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild.
Yeah, yeah,
Amazing fucking
right,
song.
right, right.
Brilliant song, but it had just been
Mhm.
so overused. But yeah, if you're not familiar with it being overused,
Right.
like the movie Shattered, where it is comically inserted into the movie, uh,
And
yeah,
this is probably the only case where I'm just as familiar with the orchestral part as I am the pop song.
yeah,
Um, love the sort of sci-fi sounds they get into when the poem starts.
they really throw everything at this, Mellotron wise and orchestral wise too.
It sounds like almost like a Star Trek score when the
Yeah.
poem starts. And just I love the poem. We decide what is right and what is an illusion. That line always stuck with me.
It's so damn naive, all of it, but it is just so well done.
Yeah, yeah. And there's nearly 20 seconds of silence at the end.
The gong.
Yeah, but the gong fades and there's like 20 seconds till the track ends. I just found that interesting.
They kind of did that in the beginning too, if you think
Well,
about
yeah,
it.
there's
How
13
many
seconds of silence at
seconds?
the beginning, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is the perfect circle
Yeah,
because you begin the album, it's still dark.
right. So on to what is this week, obviously a rhetorical question. Would you recommend it?
Oh God! If you like a concept album and haven't heard this album, you've got to listen to this fucking album.
I really wasn't sure going in. Again, this is my first time hearing the album in total. I only knew Tuesday Afternoon and Nights in White Satin. So when I get hit with this stuff that sounds like a summer place, and the summer place to me is really not a good thing. That's not a
Right,
compliment for me.
right.
Um, I really didn't know. But something happened as it progressed. It really won me over.
But it all works together.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing about this album. Taking some stuff out of context, you don't know.
Mhm.
But that it's an album that definitely it's the sum of its
It's a
parts.
masterpiece in
Yeah.
total. I absolutely recommend it.
I mean, there's so many concept albums that have come before this that got too bogged down in the story, like The Wall or Snow or even
Right.
Tommy, really, because like
Mhm.
I still don't understand what the fuck happened to Tommy at the
I
end of that.
still have to listen to Snow. I've actually never listened to it. Um,
But
but yeah,
yeah,
this one just
this
works.
right. They kept it simple. They stuck to it, and
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't a stretch.
Right, right. But again, it must have been a hell of a gut punch to people who loved that first album.
Well, I don't think they were kind of on the outs from how I understood. Like they had that, and then
well, they weren't popular, but there were people, there were diehards who loved that first album and got this new album from them and heard the orchestra and said, "What the fuck is that?"
I imagine there's a lot of people that said, "What the fuck is that?" when the orchestra began, and then all of a sudden, wait, there's the Moody Blues.
All right, so that's it for Days of Future Past. Of course, you'll find links to it down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you haven't, please subscribe. Links to the album down in the description. One of these days, I will remember to point out that I don't cut the songs into the show before we start track by track. You'll also find links to all of our stuff, Spotify, social media. I can't think. Links to subscribe to the audio versions of our shows on RSS and iTunes, and our email address. Of course, until next time, when we'll be revealing a Fight with Tools by Flowbots. Forgot to put it in my notes with a guest. Again, I think that's the end of the Whiplash. The rapid change in styles.
Flowbots from the Moody Blues? Come on.
I think as of Flowbots, we're kind of staying in an alternative vein for a while.
Okay.
Because Flowbots are kind of alternative rap. They're more alternative than rap.
More alternative than the Moody Blues.
Oh, absolutely. And it'll be from there. It's Eliza Rickman to I think to the St. Vincent David Byrne thing. No, it's Marian Call and then St. Vincent and David Byrne. We got a whole trilogy there. A St. Vincent album, a David Byrne album, and then Love This Giant, which will be a lot of fun to revisit that album.
I wonder if we're doing this before I see him. He's playing in town, like in June.
And we might change it. I think it's now. We might change it to the new album before then, because I've heard a bit of it and it's quite good.
I've heard it a few times actually. So
anyway, until then, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life, there you are.
There you are.